these are going to be some gesture drawing sites. So a couple that I recommend are lineofaction.com and QuickPose. These are both great sites. I have them bookmarked whenever I want to do some gesture drawing or gesture posing. I just open these up and you can focus on just posing out hands. You can do just facial poses, a full body pose. It's really good. And we're doing a full body pose here, but this works for facial poses, hand poses, like feet poses, even if you want to. It's really, really nice. So what you want to do here is just open this up and get some random poses. So for example, here I just set the type. I just want to pose. We're going to stick to male poses because I've got a male rig in my shot. And I'll just hit start. And we now have some random images, and I can just kind of skip ahead until I have a pose that I like, that I feel like I want to try and recapture in Maya. And some of them are really strange, some of them are very subtle, which is actually really nice because subtle poses can be very tricky to get right. Quick question, do these poses sites do creatures, dragons? I don't know. I think QuickPose, I know they do animals, so it depends on what kind of dragons you want. And if you're basing them off of a certain animal, that could work. So for example, I could do animals here. More than likely, I doubt that they're going to be doing creatures like dragons because it is real life pictures. So unless there's actual real dragons, more than likely it's actually going to be just like lions, tigers, bears, things like that. Birds. So you just want to go to these sites, and dragons are real. At least in my heart, they are. So you just want to go through and get a collection of poses. Now, one nice thing that I like about QuickPoses specifically is if I go in here and let's set this back. There we go. And I'll just hit start. Let's say I go through this and I find a pose I really like. So maybe we'll go, let's see. Okay, we'll go this one, this lounging guy. If I really want this pose and I want to start analyzing it, you can just hit right click and then open image in new tab, and it'll open the image in a new tab that you can then save it and do some draw overs on it, which is very important. Drawovers are something that I highly recommend you guys do, especially if you're new to this. Really start analyzing your posing. So let's just take some posing. I kind of got a few here. Which one do I want to do? I kind of want one subtle one and then one more dynamic one. Okay, this one's kind of cool. Let me get back to that. So maybe this one. I want a subtle one. I think. Yeah, let's go with that. So this is, it almost looks like he's straight, but we're gonna try and push that a little bit. And then let's go with, oops. Get some really interesting poses. We'll probably only have time to do 2 quick poses, but I just want a third in case. So just go through and there we go. That's a good one. Let's go with that. Okay. Don't want to spend too much time doing this. Okay. So you can go through, save your poses. You can also just go on Google, do a Google search, find some different poses, especially if you want a specific mood. Look for happy poses, sad poses, things like that. Maybe if you're doing a fighting scene, look for MMA or boxing poses so you can practice a specific thing. Now, once you have those, what I recommend is bring them into some sort of drawing software. So I'm going to be using Clip Studio Paint here, and just bring these in. Now, you could do some gesture drawing based on these. So go through and actually try to do a full gesture drawing on it. But with gesture drawing, it's not a necessary part of this, and that scene is way too wide. So let's kind of bring this in here. So I could take this and try to do a quick gesture drawing. So make sure I can see the whole thing. Gesture drawing is basically just trying to capture the main form of the pose, the main lines of action, the energy of it. And you can do it very roughly, so I'm just trying to go very quick and rough here. So something like that, and from there you can start refining. So you could do a gesture drawing. However, what I'm going to be doing here is more on the analysis side of things. And to me, that is just looking at your pose and trying to figure out what's happening with it. Why does it look appealing? Why is it interesting? And it's important to do this before you jump into Maya, because if you just jump right into Maya, you look at your pose and go, okay, let's copy that, you're going to be missing elements. You're going to be missing the little touches that will make this feel believable. Now, if you're unsure of what you should be looking at, I actually have a document here that I created at the end of last year that goes over different things you can look for in a pose to make it interesting, and you can apply into your own poses. So things like line of action, silhouette, all of these, like weight and balance. And these are elements we can look at in the pose right here. So for example, I can take a look at the line of action. Well, the line of action is pretty clear. It's this nice, beautiful line right through there. You also have a secondary line that goes from the elbow right through into the shoulder here and kind of curls down like so. So you have your primary line going through the body, secondary line going into the elbow. You even have a tertiary line going from this leg into here. So we've got these nice clean lines of action right through. And what I'll do as I'm analyzing this, we're not going to go through every single thing because honestly, it's at however deep you want to go, but it's just breaking things down. For example, why does this feel so powerful? Well, we've got this nice straight in the arm right here. Also, all the lines point to the elbow. If you actually look at this, he's elbowing here. And if we look at all the lines, the line of the eye goes right to the elbow. The line of the leg goes to the elbow. The line of this leg goes to the elbow. The shoulders go to the elbow. This arm, it goes up to his eye, which then goes to the elbow. So everything is bringing our attention right to this point. We take a look at this, we try to analyze. And like I was saying, if you're new to this, I would recommend just taking like this document here and just kind of go side by side and go one at a time. So for example, line of action, we already did that. Silhouette. Okay, what's his silhouette value like? So I'm just going to make a new layer here, super quick. And I'm just going to fill it in with color. So let's take our flat color here and just quickly draw over this character. And this will give us our silhouette value. And I don't have to be too worried about getting this perfect. This is just very rough here. But let's analyze the silhouette. And the closer you get, the better it'll be. I'm just doing this for time's sake. Okay. So we get something like that. Let's actually fill it in where it needs to be filled. So looking at our pose like this, it's still a pretty good silhouette. We understand what's going on. Okay, why is that? And this is the big thing with any of this type of analysis. Ask yourself why. Why does this feel good? Why is it, even though we've blocked everything out and it's just a blob, why does it feel like it's still readable? Well, let's start with the arm going forward. It's readable and not just a big blob because there's a little negative space right there. If we look at the pose, you can see just a little gap in that arm. That makes it so that you can focus on the fact that it's actually the elbow that's going forward and not his arm doing this, kind of pushing forward. We feel that bend. On the back arm here, it feels clear because we can see the bend of the elbow, the arm going down here, and then the elbow going screen left. If the silhouette was just straight like this, suddenly it's not as clear. Same thing with the legs. We can feel even with the rough drawings that I did, we can feel where the ankle is bending. We can feel where the knees are very easily. It's all very legible. Even though it's not all open and everything's kind of out in silhouette, we still get the idea. So we figure out why. Why does it work? And also ask yourself, why doesn't it work? So for example, if the silhouette, let's say, was like this and we had this silhouette here, suddenly that's hard to see what's going on. Is the character like wearing a shirt and he's doing this, or he's kind of like Batman or Dracula and he's got the cape over his mouth? We don't know. It's hard to see. So why, again, we ask ourselves, why doesn't it work? And how could we make that better? So looking at poses is not just figuring out why it's good, it's also figuring out why it's bad. And once again, just go through each thing. So straights versus curves. This is basically on one side of the body, you're going to have a little bit more of a straight versus the other, which is a little bit more of a curve. Now, this is something more stylistic, but you see this in real life as well. So for example, if we look at this silhouette here, let's get my drawing tool back. Let's get my pencil here and make a new layer. So straight versus curves is typically on one side of the silhouette of the body, you're going to have a little bit more of a clean, simple line. On the other side, it's going to be more complex. Well, we can actually see that here. On this side, you get a nice, simple form. On the other, we get a complex form. That adds visual interest. Simple versus complex, straight versus curve. So we're taking all of this in. Okay, weight and balance. How is the character balanced? Well, he's on both feet right now. So he's balanced on both feet, but he's definitely favoring his front foot. So if I look at where his balance point is, just draw a line, usually from the collar. If your character isn't running or moving, take a point from the collarbone, like right in that middle there, and go straight down. So that's going to be right around here, straight down. That should be his balance point. So he is putting more weight onto that front leg right now. He's pushing forward. That's a very important point. And this is one of the biggest ones that I see a lot of students fail at when they're posing out a character. And this is not that it is a failure in terms of like, how to put this? I'll put it this way. It's something that we as humans have a subconscious knack to do, is that we line things up. When people pose out, let's say a pose like this, we have the tendency to want to line up the head, the neck, and the hips all in line. So for example, if I was to draw a similar pose, the common tendency that people would have is that even though I was going to push the line of action here right through, the hip would end up getting placed right around here, and then the leg would be the thing that goes back. So you get this, drawing it very simply here. So something like that. But if you look at where the hips are in comparison to the head and neck, see how they're all lined up? If I just do a straight line right here, whoop, they all kind of line up with each other a little bit. That's a human tendency that we have. We want to have the body straight. Instead, if we look at the center of the hips, up, let's go even straight up. Whoop. Look at how far the head is in comparison to the hips, especially the center of the head. Center of the chest is over here. We definitely feel that angle there. So you're paying attention to this weight of the character, this balance. Where are they leaning? How far are they leaning? And this is especially helpful in subtle shots. So for example, here, let's take that center point here on the neck and go straight down. You'll notice that his hips are actually not centered. The center of his hips is here. He's leaning forward in the hips. If you were actually to look at this, he's not straight. He's curved. There's just this ever so slight bend to the entire body. It's like a bow and arrow. You've got that leading of the hips right in there. It's very subtle, but it's there. So we're looking at that weight and balance. Which leg are they favoring? We can actually see here, this leg is actually straight, whereas the other leg is bent outwards, which tells us that he's favoring this leg here. He's being supported on that leg a little bit more. Looking at those little details. Asymmetry. Trying to find the way that things are a little asymmetrical. So for example, one of the big ones that I see are feet. As people are posing, they tend to keep the feet very linear, kind of straight side to side. Very rarely does that happen in real life. Instead, feet tend to point in or out a little bit. So if we look at this, just draw a line of the feet. So we get, I'm just kind of drawing from the heel right here, do a straight line out, heel, straight line out. Look at that. They're not parallel. If I was to keep going, let's actually go the other way. So like this, and like that, you can see that the feet are not parallel. They're pointing outwards. As we look at this one here, look at the angle of the feet. Definitely not parallel. We're looking for all of those little bits of asymmetry. It goes right down to the feet, all the way up to the top of the head. Look at how the body is positioned. These are going to be super helpful. Asymmetry is going to really help avoid that flat feeling in your poses. Simplified forms. This is a good one to analyze, which is basically, how can we simplify this to its base forms? So in this case, if we kind of squint, and this is where you can just kind of take a step back and just squint at it, or if you want to be really fancy, you could just add a blur filter. So for example, let's take this and I'm just going to go to blur and let's up that a huge amount. So we do something like that. What are the main forms that we see? Without the detail, we are seeing kind of this triangular form here. And here. So it kind of does this. This is the main form of the pose. Now when we transition this into whatever program we're in, we can take that and try to enhance that main idea, the main form of the pose. And you can simplify this in a lot of different ways. So for example, you could even think about it like the top half here, and then the hips are just this kind of wedge shape there. So like this, straight, bend, straight between both feet there. Straight, corner, right there. Simplified forms. It's just a good way to analyze the core of the pose. And this again goes for anything. So even here, what's the simplified form? Let's once again blur this. Yep. Crazy amount of blur. Actually, did I just blur? I just blurred one layer. Okay, blur. So if we look at this, the form, you can actually see it has a lean to it. It's leaning this way. And one side is simpler than the other. This one has a little bit of a bend to it. Like so. So that's the simplified form. It's just this kind of slightly bent, I guess you could say rectangle-ish. So let's see, can I get that slideshow? Yes, it's, if you go to the Discord, which should be linked down below, it's posted in there, and here's the link to it right there. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can check it out right there. So going through, now one of my favorites is Contrapposto and Twist. That's really going to be good, seeing where the angle of the shoulders versus the hips are, especially. So for example, here we can really feel the shoulders angled this way, whereas the hips are kind of flatter. So we're seeing that slight offset. We're also seeing, and this is trickier to spot sometimes, but look for the twist. As he's going forward, how is his body going to be moving? And this is where it's good to try it out yourself. So if I do this, I can feel my body, it needs to twist to get that elbow forward. I'm not just kind of doing this with the elbow straight out. The whole upper half rotates this way. Now, as he's doing that, I would want to stand up and try it with the legs as well. But as he's doing this and pushing forward, his hips most likely are going to be a little bit less twisted. So if we kind of think of this as a cube, you would have, I'm going to exaggerate this here, you would have this, where the front of the chest is more twisted than the hips. Now that's way too far. That would snap his spine right there if that was the actual twist. But take a look at where things are pointing. And usually if the character wasn't wearing like black shorts, you could use the center line. So for example, the center line of the chest is right here. The center line of the hips is probably right there. Let's see if we have a good pose that's easy to see. Of course, we saved all the ones that were wearing black pants. But look for that twist and the contrapposto. That'll help you really push that visual interest in your posing. Sympathetic action. This is something that you definitely want to like feel it out. So for example, if I raise my elbow like this, what's happening to the shoulder? What's happening to the back muscles? What's happening to the muscles, your lat muscles right in here, all your pectoral and all of that right through there. As you lift that, try to feel it. What's stretching? What's compressing? And it's all the way through the body. So if I bring my shoulder up here, the other shoulder is going to react as well. If I bring my other hand up here, I can really feel my back tensing up. Try to figure out how the whole body is connected in a pose. And again, that's regardless of pose. Whether it's a very extreme pose like this or even a subtle pose like this one, how is everything connected? If I tilt my head down, how is the neck reacting? Look for these little things. Look for the relationship between all the different elements. So we could keep going and keep going, but I would just go through this entire list and analyze it and try to figure it out. And once again, it's asking yourself, why? Why does it work? Why does it not? How can I improve it? So an example of how can I improve it is tangents. Tangents are when lines start to butt up against each other and create a visual illusion on a pose. And usually it's, for example, if I had my hands, let's go over here. This is a typical example I tend to go with. If I have two hands here and I put them side to side, we can see that they're butted up side to side right there. That's good. If I separate them, okay, we can still see that they're side to side. If I bring one forward and one back, we can see that one is forward and one is back because of the size difference. One hand's larger, one hand's smaller because of perspective. If I overlap them, even more so, we can see that one is ahead of the other. A tangent is when you have that, but then you line them up like so that they just touch. And suddenly, it looks like the hands are next to each other, side to side, butting up against each other. But we've got one tiny little hand and one much larger hand, oddly. It's a visual illusion. Our brain, because it's side to side, our brain tells us that they must be on the same plane, that they must be actually touching. This is how Lord of the Rings made the hobbits feel so small, whereas everyone else felt so big. It's just this kind of perspective trickery. And a tangent breaks that trickery. It makes us think that things should be side to side. So, in this case, well, we're getting just a hair of a tangent right here. Now, a tangent is really dependent on how close or far you are from the pose. So for example, if this was a hand pose that was this close here, yeah, you're not going to have any problem. That's not a tangent. But if it's far enough away, so maybe out here, those fingers start to look like they're just barely touching the edge of the cloth. That's a tangent. So as I'm looking at this pose, I'm telling myself, I've got to push that. I need to make that clearer in my shot so I don't get a tangent. And this goes for anything. This one's not so bad. There's not really any tangents on this one, which is good. Actually, there is. Look at his nose. If you look at the muscle of his deltoid right there, the shoulder, and then the nose, they line up perfectly, which creates a weird illusion. Oops, and I drew it on the wrong layer. That the nose is being like pushed into the corner of his deltoid right there. It's like sitting right in there. So in order to push this a little bit more, we might want to just push that nose a little higher or a little lower in our own pose. Little things. But by going through this, looking through them, analyzing, you're not going to get it all at first, especially if you're new to animation, but it's going to give you a starting point. And honestly, you don't have to spend much time doing this either. 5 minutes even. Just kind of quickly going through the checklist and going, okay, paying attention to them, putting them into your mental repository so that you have them ready to go, ready to put into your shot. That's going to make a huge difference in your work. Just that. So let's say we've done that. We've gone through the whole list. There's more in here, but I would definitely recommend all of you just kind of explore that and work with trying to understand each one. Once you have them, let's go into Maya. So let's say now we're ready to pose. Now we're ready to start actually posing this character out. Now I'm actually going to start with this pose here. It's a simpler pose, but that's kind of the reason why I want to start with it, because simple poses are the ones that I often see students struggle with the most because, well, they're just so darn simple. There's not much there to it. So let's say we've got our character and we want to pose them here. We've already analyzed, done a quick analysis. What I typically see when students start working on a pose, and let me actually, I'll just bring back my status line. Okay. There we go. what I'll typically see for a pose like this is a very quick rendition of it, where especially students who are starting out, they kind of block the main forms, but leave it at that and call it done. So let's do a quick example of this. So this character, okay, the feet are a little wider, so I'll just widen the feet. Something like that. Okay, feet wider, done. Arm to the side. Something like that, done. Other arm, I'm going to just set this to IK. There we go. And let's move this into place here. So get that out of it. Oops. Get that out of his head here. So hand pointing there, and then the elbow is going to be forward. Okay. And then we get the angle of the head. Okay. That's it. I could call this done. Now, is that a good pose? Not really. There's a lot of things wrong with that. I really haven't paid attention to much in terms of all the other things we talked about. But this is, it's not an exaggeration. This is something I see a lot in student posing, is just quickly putting things roughly into place and calling it done, and starting their animations from something like this. Maybe a little bit more polished, but really not much. And the problem is that because this is such a rough base, you're just not going to get appeal out of it. No matter how much you polish your animation, this pose just honestly isn't good. It's just not interesting. There's so many elements that are missing that make the pose in the real reference look kind of interesting and dynamic, and this one just flat and dead. So let's start applying all those different elements. Now, again, this is why you analyze the pose first. If you could technically just start posing out and analyze as you're going. As you get more experience, you can do that very easily. But if you take some time to analyze everything first, you're going to have a better roadmap of where you're supposed to be going, and you're going to avoid having to redo a lot of work. So let's kind of just pose this out and really pay attention to the details. And again, revert back to that or refer back to that checklist if ever you're unsure of if you're missing something or not. So let's take this pose, and we're actually going to make a new key here. So just so we can compare the two. So let's key all. And this time, whenever I start, I like to start from the hips and feet first. Typically the feet, just because, especially on a pose, they kind of tell a lot of where the weight of the character is going to be, how the character is going to be posed out. So looking at the feet first, first thing, just like we had mentioned here, the feet are pointing outwards. And sleep deprived, hey, thank you so much for the sub. Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's super nice of you. And I just noticed, Tara, thank you so much for keeping me alive with the water reminders. So let's just quickly put the feet at a little bit of an angle here. Already, look at how much more. Oh, geez. Just Oni, thank you so much for the gift subs. Oh, geez. Thank you so much. And hey, Peon, my Peon. Hey, it's been a while. How's it going? Oh, thank you so much, Jazoni. I really appreciate that. And Makadane, welcome. And Dak, welcome as well. That was super nice of you. So we've posed the feet and already that makes a difference. So for example, if we just go back and forth here, you can see how the feet just feel a little bit more alive just by taking that little, putting them out slightly. Now, another thing we can watch is the angle of the feet. Usually one foot's going to be a little bit more forward than the other. So in this case, I kind of feel like the screen left foot is ever so slightly forward. And this adds to the twist. If we actually look at this here, and let's make sure I'm on a separate layer. There's the line of the feet going this way and the line of the body going this way. If we bring them closer together, see how they're not parallel? The program that I'm using to draw is Clip Studio Paint. The one that I'm using with the 3D rig is Maya. I just bumped them side by side. But if we look at the shoulders and the feet, oh, there's an offset there. There's a twist in there. So when we were looking at contrapposto twist, this is where we'd see it. We can actually also look at the shoulders here. So the shoulders are angled this way. Hips are kind of angled more straight. So there's our contrapposto. So we're paying attention to these. We're looking for these. Okay. So we've got the feet. I moved this one ever so slightly forward. Perfect. Now, let's look at the hips. So I next look at the hips and the main line of action of the body. The main line of action is this. There's this curve to it. I'm exaggerating it a little bit here, but he's leading with his hips. His hips are actually more forward than his chest. If we look at our pose, everything is just perfectly in line. It's boring. If we go a straight line from the hips all the way to the neck, it's in line. To the head, it's in line. Middle of the head, middle of the neck, middle of the hips. Blech. So let's just bump him forward. Push those hips forward. Get him to lean slightly. As you're posing, always look at your pose from all angles. So I'm not just looking at it from this view right here and just moving that on its own. I am moving all the views together. So I'll look at this. Okay, how far forward do I want to go? Not too far so that he's out of balance, but just enough that it's interesting. Get those legs nice and straight. Okay. Now, while we're still on the hips, let's think of the rotations. So whenever I'm posing, I like to go through my checklist of translations and rotations. You've got your translate X, Y, and Z, your rotations X, Y, and Z. So that's your side to side, up and down, forward, back. Well, let's go through and make sure we apply a little bit of everything. So translate Y, that's the up and down. Well, I know his knees are straight, so I'm going to make sure that those stay straight. Perfect. We already moved him forward, so yay, we're good there. But we haven't moved him side to side yet. Well, like we saw in the pose here, he's favoring this leg. This leg is straight, whereas this leg is curved. So let's do that. Let's favor the one side just a little bit. Like so. Already that's making those legs much more interesting here. We're getting this much more dynamic form to the pose when we're pushing that asymmetry. Okay, rotations, same thing. On almost any pose, you're going to have a little bit of every rotation in there. So, starting with the hips, rotate Y. So rotate Y is the twist this way, at least in Maya. If you're in Blender, it's going to be rotate Z. In this case, it's going to follow the feet. The hips are sympathetic to the feet, which means that if I move my let's say my right leg forward, my right hip will also tend to go forward, typically. So, knowing that this right foot is ever so slightly forward, let's just bump that hip ever so slightly forward on that side as well. Okay. rotate Z. Since he's putting weight into this leg here, more likely he's going to start dipping on the other side, like so. I'm exaggerating this a little bit right now, but if he's supporting his weight on this side, the other side's going to dip. It's not being supported as much, so the weight's going to drag it down. So we get something a little bit more like that. And already you can see, look at that curve we're starting to get in the body. It's very similar to what we're starting to get here. Now, rotate X, this is a tricky one. Rotate X is hard to see in reference, but keep in mind that it does the opposite of the body. So for example, if I lean forward, my hips, so let's actually draw this out. If I lean forward this way, my hips will rotate the other way. So in Maya, if I was to rotate the character forward here, let's say, oh, his poor arm, the hips would rotate the opposite way and counter that motion. That's the typical idea of it. So rotate X. In this case, if he's leaning back a little bit, we can kind of feel that tilt back ever so slightly. He's kind of doing this a little bit. So if his chest is ever so slightly back, his hips are going to be ever so slightly forward. Just like that. Now I'm moving this in object mode. So in Maya, you can switch from world mode, which lines up with the axis of the world, which means the axis of this doesn't change. Typically when I'm moving a character like this, it's almost always going to be in object mode based on the actual individual object I'm working with. So we got the hips. Now, as we're going through this, keep in mind that this is not done. Just because I touched the hips doesn't mean like, hey, I'm done. I never have to worry about them again. This is just going through and quickly getting them into place. From there, I keep working, and then I can always go back down to the hips to make adjustments. So let's go into the spine. Now, everyone has a preference for spine controls. Some people prefer IK. If you're starting out, I would recommend FK spine. It moves more like how the real body, the actual body moves. So I would start with those. And when I work with an FK body, for most rigs, I'll use all the FK controls and move them as one unit. This makes sure that as the body twists, you're getting nice natural twisting versus a weird like bend in one section. So for example, if I took the upper chest control and just kind of tweaked that, that's breaking a rib right there. So let's do the chest. So I'm working from the root, the hips, and now I'm working my way outwards. And once again, we refer back to what we saw earlier, and we look at our 3 axes of rotation, X, Y, and Z. So rotate, let's start with rotate X. His chest is just ever so slightly back. So I'm just going to take this, boop, just put it a little bit back. It helps push that line of action in there. Rotate Y, that's the twist. Well, he's got this arm and it's pulling him back. We saw that twist earlier when we looked at the angle of the feet versus the angle of the shoulders here. So let's twist this back just a little bit. This is a very subtle pose, and you could exaggerate if you want, but I want to keep it kind of subtle just to show how much of a difference it does. So we've got that. And then we need our rotate Z right here. Now, as we can see, he's kind of leaning kind of this way. So I can maybe just push that a little bit more here. It'll help push that line of action just a bit. Now I want to be careful how far I push it, because if I look at the balance point, I'm still paying attention to that. Look at the pit of the neck down to the feet. So that's this point here down to the feet. See how he's lined up with his screen left foot. Right now, if I do the same, I'm kind of just in the center here. Just like a little scooch off of that foot. So I'm actually doing pretty good here. I'm not pushing the character too far out of balance yet. Now, things still look very strange though. That's because I don't have the shoulders in place. They're not working at all yet. But we're still getting this to work. And once again, make sure you're looking at the pose from all angles. It's not 100% necessary as long as it looks good from the main camera. That's the important thing. But in general, especially when you're starting, you want a pose to look good from all angles, because it's going to make your shot just more interesting and much easier to tweak if you suddenly have to change your camera angle or change the pose a little bit. If you're just breaking the pose and hoping that it'll look good, you're going to have a lot of trouble later on. Okay, so we've got the hips and the chest. Hey, we're getting there. And we're just analyzing. I'm not trying to copy. This is a key point here. I'm not trying to make this a perfect replica of the original pose. Not at all. Right now, I'm just trying to capture the elements, and from there, I can exaggerate it later. As you get more experience, you can start exaggerating it right away. But as you're first starting, try to keep it somewhat close and then go for the exaggeration. It'll just make sure that you're on the right track before things get too out of hand. So let's do the head and neck now. So as I'm posing the head and neck, I will typically go from the chest and then go up to the head first. I skip the neck. The reason for that is that the neck is sympathetic to the head. So wherever I move my head, my neck tends to follow. So for example, if I tilt my head down, my neck goes down. Tilt my head up, neck goes up. Side to side, same thing. So if I get the angle of my head, I get the angle of the neck. Now there are there are exceptions to that. So for example, if I take my neck back and move my head down, you get this, the double chins. If you take your head up and move your neck down, you get the slouch, like so. That chicken neck, like that, or pigeon. So there are exceptions, but in general, for relaxed motions, you're going to have a sympathetic connection. What if you're working with an FK neck? I am working with an FK neck right now, so that's the way I typically work. If you're working with an IK neck, you're just going to want to translate the head as well as rotating it. So let's get the angle of the head in place first. Now, let's just reset it super quick. As I look at the angle of the head, there's a few landmarks that I tend to look for. Let's kind of zoom in here. So it's really just looking at the facial features. Again, we're not looking to do this so that we can copy it exactly, but just so we know what angles we're looking at. Let's see, I think that's where I've been struggling most recently. I tend to follow reference so closely in both posing and timing that it loses that creative spark. Exactly. So I'm going to show you how to exaggerate it after this here. So let's kind of look at the landmarks of the face. So the first landmark is the corners of the brow right here. If you look for those 2 points here, this will give you the angle of the head side to side. And then if you look at the ear, top of the ear versus that same point there, this will tend to give you the angle of the head forward and back. The angle of the ear, let's go here, the top of the ear to the top of the eye is basically in line. So if I look straight at the camera here, ear, let's get the ear free here, but ear to the eye is in line. So if I look down, the ear is now going to be higher than the eye. So it's tilting down like so. If I look up, eyebrow is higher than the ear. That shows I'm looking up. So if you look at that relationship between the ear and the brow, you can kind of get the angle. Now on your rig, it might be different. Your character might have huge ears or tiny little eyes or vice versa. So that relationship doesn't matter as much when you're looking at the rig, but at least when you're looking at your reference, it gives you an idea of where the head is tilted. So with this, we can kind of get that idea of the angle of the head here without kind of getting lost in all the facial details. Now, again, does this mean we have to copy it? No, it just gives us a starting point and make sure that we're on the right track. So it's tilted to the side and then down. Something like that. Okay. We got the angle of the head kind of in place, and then he's kind of looking off to the side this way a little bit. Okay, we can probably exaggerate that a lot more. Now, I haven't got to the face yet, so that'll help a lot too. It'll help avoid that blank, horrible expression. Okay, so we get the neck in, we've got the head in place. Let's get the neck in place. Now, the neck is fairly simple. It really just goes forward and back and just a little side to side. Oh, and yeah, thank you for the reminder. There we go. So I just got the head angle in place there. So yeah, get the head angle a little twisted to the side, like so. Now we get to the neck. So in this case, the neck goes forward. So we're going to do that. Bring that forward. You can really see that angle of the neck here, how it's going forward on the body here. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, you could go side to side a little bit, but the neck actually doesn't do too much side to side. So if anything, I might just kind of bring it over a little bit this way, just a little bit. Let's see how it feels. So now we're getting that slouch in there, where we've got that angle of the neck going back, and we've got a nice curvature right along the back here, which is good. Okay. So we've got that roughly in place. Now I can already see, kind of just based on the head angle here, I could tilt this a lot more. Let's really crank that. And this is where adding that draw over helps, because I can visually see this line right here. There's that line there. And I can imagine it on my reference and make sure I'm getting at least an equal line, or try to exaggerate it more. So yeah, let's go with that. And maybe bring the neck down just a scooch more. Okay. Now, shoulders. Shoulders and arms. This is where sympathetic motion really comes into play. Whenever you're dealing with the arms, there is a lot of sympathetic action. So in this case, he's kind of slouched and there's a tension to him. If you look at the shoulders, they're kind of raised up ever so slightly. So the shoulder here is actually going up right there. It's kind of hard to see with the coat. And same thing here. It's curled up. He's got this tension to him. He's not relaxed. If he was relaxed, we would see this slope downwards of the shoulders. And this is Maya and Clip Studio Paint. So if we go here, let's add that tension to the shoulders. So we'll take this and just add a little bit of tension in here. And already you can kind of feel that motion going in. Now, when you're adding tension, keep in mind that we can bring our shoulders up, down, and forward and back. There's a whole range of motion. This is just the clavicles. And of all the controls I ever see when people are posing, these are the controls that people miss the most. And if you miss the clavicles, you are not going to have a pose. Like, it's that simple. Clavicles are just so important to a pose. That's your shrug controls here. Without them, we can't move our arms in any natural way. So always pay attention to your clavicles and try the pose yourself. So for example, if I raise my arm here, I can feel my shoulder go up and forward as I do this. As I kind of shrug the other one, that one's kind of coming forward too. There's kind of this this hunching inwards. It helps to add that kind of nervous energy a little bit. So let's kind of just bring that forward ever so slightly, and maybe just a little lower on that side so the other side can be a little higher. So something like that. And Tony, thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate that. Now let's actually get the other hand in place. So the important thing with the hand is to look at the visual anchors. How much does camera angle make? Oh, the camera angle is going to make a huge difference. So you want, if you're trying to create a replica of the pose, you want to make sure your camera angle's similar. It doesn't have to be though. So for example, let me go here. Like if I wanted my pose to be this way, it's still the same thing. I can use that reference and repose it. I'll just have to exaggerate different things. I would want my line of action to be a little bit more clearer here. It doesn't have to match exactly, but that's just a matter of knowing where your camera is in relation to your character. The closer you can get, the easier it is. Now, one thing to watch out for here is the visual anchors. So visual anchors are the things like sleeves or lines on the body that let us see which direction things are pointed. So for example, here we can see that his sleeve has this curve right here, which tells us that his arm is not angled backwards but forwards, which is good because that's the way our arms naturally relax. When we're relaxed, our arms don't sit straight beside our body. This is actually very unnatural. Instead, when we're relaxed, our elbows bend forward ever so slightly. So if that arm is somewhat relaxed, his hand's actually going to be doing this, just a little bit. And then the upper arm tends to go back a little bit here. So you get a little back and forward. This kind of creates this little flow into the body. And then let's kind of pull this out just a little bit. Get that nice angle. And then keep in mind that we can take our arm and then rotate it this way. That's your shoulder rotating, not your elbow. So I can tweak that and pull that arm there, like so. So the reason I'm doing this, and let's exaggerate, is if I just bend the arm like this, you can see how I get this really steep bend in the arm. But if we look at our reference, we can kind of see a little bit of a bend here, just a little bit, but it's very slight. It's almost a straight. And that's because his arm is curved inwards, like this. His hand is moving in towards the center of his body. So I'm, again, watching for those little details, those little hints that tell me where things are lining up. So let's kind of bring that elbow back down just a little bit and then tweak the arm here. Something like that. And then let's go to the wrist. And we can definitely see, again, visual anchors, how the wrist, if we look at this line compared to this line, how much that wrist is bent. You could also just look at this versus this. Look at those angles there. So I can actually probably raise this just a little bit more, just a little bit, and then bring that hand down. Something more like that. Okay. Now, let's actually finish this hand here. As you're posing, a lot of people will pose out the arm, kind of get that all done, and then call it a day. And it's just, okay, we're good. Keep going. Pose out the hands. Never, ever, ever forget about the hands. It doesn't mean that you have to take an hour to pose out every single joint and make it absolutely perfect. But hands are so important. They are one of the biggest parts of a pose. Just psychologically, what we look at in a pose is the eyes first, then the face second, hands third. Then we look at the rest of the pose. So if you look or if you don't pose out the hands, you're missing a big part of what we as humans tend to look at when we are looking at other people. It also just, it's part of the pose. A hand is so expressive. So never just leave it at its default. So for example, here, I can just take a little bit of time and I'm just going to relax that hand. And I can use the reference here as a guide. I also like to use my own hand just to kind of get an idea of how the joints are bending. So for example, let's get that thumb maybe not quite so far in there. Yeah, so I'm just looking down at my hand as I relax it there. Now he's kind of doing this with his hands. He's pinching a little bit. So let's kind of get that finger bent in a little bit. And get that thumb back into place there. Okay. So something like that. Yeah, the hands are so important. Probably the biggest critique I give to students throughout the term as I'm teaching is to pose out the hands. It is so crucial. And just take a little bit of time with it. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a masterpiece. You don't have to spend an hour posing out hands, but even just something like this is going to make a huge difference. Now, if I wanted to polish this up a little bit more, keep in mind that the knuckles bend as well. So there's a curvature to the knuckles. So if I look at this, they're kind of a little too straight. So I'm going to use the cup control to add just a little bit more curve to that. Into those knuckles there. And then I can use the metacarpal controls, that's the controls down here, to bring the fingers just a little closer and tighten up the gap between the fingers. The metacarpals do move. It's not going to be a ton. It's not like we can just flex and web our fingers, but just doing a little bit there makes a big difference. And then making sure that the fingers all curl in. When you bend your fingers, they all curl into the center of your palm. So if we look at this here, that took, how long? Less than a minute? And it's so much better. And Animouth, hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So that hand pose literally took less than a minute. And that feels much better, doesn't it? It just feels like there's character. He's a little nervous. He's kind of bringing his fingers close together versus just straight paddle hand. Now, if I wanted to, I can maybe tweak it a little bit because I'm noticing his index finger is a little bit more in on the reference. Again, I don't have to copy, but in this case, I just want to get it close-ish. Okay. And really what I want is that negative space between the thumb and the hand. So something a little bit more like that. So really getting that negative space in here. Nice and clear. Okay. I'm getting an arc to those fingers. Okay. So let's say something like that. Okay. Now the other arm. Well, let's take a look at that. So what are we noticing? Well, one, we're noticing that we can see a little bit of depth in there. So we're seeing the angle of the arm. So again, look at your visual anchors. So if we look at this, we can see the top of the arm here angling down, then the lower arm angling upwards. Well, we've got the lower arm angling up, but he's doing this instead. So our pose is a little off here. Now, this is where it can be very different. If your character is proportioned like this, where instead of a normal character, they're just this really cartoony character with tiny little arms, that's going to be very different. They're not going to be able to reach up as high. You might have to change your proportions quite a bit and how the posing works. But we can still at least pay attention to that, make a note of it, and now we're making a conscious choice to change it, and we're not just moving things for the sake of moving them. So let's take this here. First of all, with this hand, I'm going to look at where he's touching. He's right behind his ear. So I'm definitely way too far back here. Bring that forward, and already that's getting that hand in line there. And let's get the wrist in line. Now with the wrist, you have to be very careful. We can't really bend our wrist towards the thumb side there. So like this, his wrist would be broken. That angle there to there is too much. So I have to be very careful that I don't over rotate that as I'm posing this out. So something along these lines would be decent. So something like that. Now, I have a choice here. And this is where the exaggeration comes in. We're going to do another pass on exaggeration afterwards. But if I want to push the silhouette value, I can do that. So for example, one thing I wouldn't want is the elbow and the shoulder to line up like this, because you don't see the upper arm. You want to show a little bit of that bend. So you want to see a little upper arm, a little lower arm. It makes for a better pose in general. With that said, I could exaggerate that. We're just seeing a little bit right here. I could make that more or less. So I could really bring the hand in here so we see a lot of that arm, or I could reduce that and tweak it to what I want. This is my pose. I am not locked to what my shot, or sorry, what my reference is at all. I can do whatever I want as long as it's not broken. Okay, now we've got the hand kind of roughly in place. Because it's touching his head, we're going to have a lot of back and forth, but I want to show one thing, and that is if we reset this shoulder, how broken this pose is going to start looking. So as he's reaching up here, his clavicle is not activating. I'm just leaving it alone, and it creates this weird disconnect. It's almost like his head is cranking to reach his hand, like he's just doing this and then trying to reach his head down to his hand. That's not right. His arm is the thing that's going up to his head. So instead, I would want to take this and move that up. So if he's raising his arm, that clavicle is going forward because his arm is going forward, and then up. So let's go up first. Whoop. I could really push this. And Toxiana, hey, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Oh, and I just saw there's a few notifications here. You guys are keeping me alive with the water. So we can push that and kind of push that shrug in there. And now suddenly it feels like his arm is activated in there. That's a sympathetic motion right through there. There are a lot of subs today. It's weird. To me, what changed today? Is it just the new year? I really appreciate it though. Thank you so much, everyone. So we've got the shoulder in place now. We can readjust the hand ever so slightly. I just want to tweak that a little bit. I want a little bit of negative space between his head and his hand. That way we can see that he's not pressing his hand against his head. We can actually see it a little bit right here too. So it's good to keep that in mind. And then let's just quickly pose out the fingers. So he's doing this. He's scratching his head. Which means that finger pose wise, it's going to be something like this. So he's going to be fancy. He's going to keep his pinky out. There we go. Let's just go full fancy. Weep. No, let's not do that. So bring that in there. And I'm just roughly posing this in. Once again, you don't have to go full hand posing right away. It's really just making sure at least it's posed. And you can see just by doing that, just bending the fingers, how much better it feels. Would you have a constraint if he's scratching his head? On this rig, no. So on this rig, there's a really cool feature, and I can actually turn this on here. If I take the IK control, I can switch the space of the control. By default, it's set to root, which means it follows the root space, the main control at the base of the character. If I set this to head space, right there, I'm going to have to reposition the hand, because I've got some keys on it here. But let's say I put it there. As I move the head, it follows along. So if your rig doesn't have that, yes, you're going to have to create a constraint. But in my case, because this rig has this feature, I can just turn that on, and then now if he was holding a cell phone and he's talking, or if he's scratching his head and kind of doing this, that's it, I'm done. And Mario, hello! The studio in which I work is currently gives tasks to completely copy from reference without any character to it. And after, if they never approve it easily, what should I do? That's tricky, because if it's a studio asking you to do that, you have to do what they ask. It's really following the directions. If it's just direct copying, the big thing I would say is try to enhance as much as you can without going too far. So for example, if you see the line of action, try to make it just a little bit more interesting. If there's a little asymmetry, try to push it just a little bit more. Make those little things just more and better. And that's going to at least give it a little something. Unfortunately, this is something that happens at certain studios where, depending on the direction, they want things to be like, for example, just follow the reference exactly, follow the motion capture exactly. And in general, that doesn't really give super great results. But as an animator, we have to follow what they say. That's our job. It's just kind of part of that process there. So unfortunately, I don't have much in terms of suggestion other than you can try to push it as much as you can. Now, why am I posing the arm in IK? So I'm posing this arm in IK here, specifically because it's contacting with the head. So because it's contacting with the head, if I was to pose this hand in FK, and I had to make a change to the head pose and move things around, I would have to then repose the entire arm to reconnect to the head, get the fingers to connect to the head, all of that. With IK, I can literally just do this and it's all done. All I need to do is kind of reposition it. So in this case, I want to get it to his ear. So make sure those fingers are right at the ear. Right here. So a little bit more like that. Let's get those fingers a little tighter together. A lot of people, when they're bending fingers, they just rotate in the main like forward axis. Don't do that. Fingers rotate in all axes, specifically on the base knuckles there. So for example, the index finger here is going to rotate inwards right there. Now I think I can actually put a little bit more rotation this way just to add a little bit more depth. And as you're posing fingers, another thing to watch out for is the angle of the fingers. So fingers almost always end up being on a curve. So if we look at the knuckles here, notice that there's a curve there. If we look at the next line of knuckles, look at the shape difference in that curve here. We can use that to our advantage to try and exaggerate our posing in Maya. So if I look at these knuckles, let's zoom in. What we're getting is a curve here. And hey, Jim, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So if we look at the curve of his knuckles here, we get that curve kind of matching a little bit. It's not perfect, but at least it's somewhat close. I can probably exaggerate it just a little bit more here. But the other fingers, yeah, that's definitely wrong. It's kind of doing this W shape to it. So let's rotate those fingers to really push that shape. And Espen, thank you so much for the sub as well. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's really nice of you guys. So I'm using what I can see in the reference to try and exaggerate the posing in my shot. And again, this is not a matter of copying. I'm not trying to copy my reference. What I'm trying to do is take inspiration from my reference, because very easily I could pose this out and I could end up with everything kind of feeling like, let's kind of draw it out here, where one curve is like this, the next curve is like this, and then the other fingers are like, they're all just even curves, just even. But if I look at my reference, I can go, oh no, wait, there's more to that. And I can take that element and enhance it, make it more, make it stronger in my actual shot. And it gives me something to base it off of that's based on real life. And it avoids me having to try and come up with every single little detail myself, because honestly, like, we're posing every element of the character from their toes to the tops of the hair. If you're having to come up with everything yourself, it's tiring. It's just, you're never going to end. So by letting the reference guide you a little bit, you just simplify your life. Now, I saw a question here. If he scratches his ear, what do you do to bend the ear? On this rig, there are actually ear controls. So if I take the facial controls and turn those on, there's actually an ear control here that I could use to bend and rotate the ear here, which I would want to do to show that he's actually interacting with his ear. Normally I would do this more in the polish phase. So we've got that. But let's see, is this good? I think for now this is pretty good. Let's actually look at how the whole pose is working. So we've got this. Now, is it perfect? No. This was the first pass. And this is one of the things with posing in animation, is that as you're posing, you're not just going to do it once. You do it in passes. You try to get everything working to a good level, and then you do a second pass and sometimes a third pass. But it's important because everything that you animate is going to be based on this. If this pose does not work correctly, the animation is not going to work correctly, and you're going to have more work later on trying to fix it than if you just take a little bit more time here to try and make the pose more interesting. This doesn't mean that you have to do every tiny little thing and make it absolutely perfect. No. It just means taking a little time to make sure that there's nothing wrong with it and that you're exaggerating where you can. This is our, we'll just call it our first pass of the shot. And I'm actually going to save this by going one more frame forward, and let's key everything. At this point, we've kind of copied the pose. Now we just want to exaggerate things. We want to make it better than the original reference. And this is where, again, you just want to go through that checklist of posing concepts, line of action, contrapposto, all of these things. Try to find places that you can exaggerate them. Try to push the core value of this pose. So for example, if a character is angry, really make them angry, not just a little peeved. Really make them angry. If they're happy, not just a happy. No, make them ecstatic. Now, this doesn't mean that you go crazy and you change the whole pose, but try to find these areas that you can make things feel just more. So in this case, the character kind of feels nervous. He's kind of like looking, there's maybe a little bit of confusion in there. How can I push this? Well, that's going to be a lot of shoulders and head. Maybe I can push his head just a little bit lower. That's the wrong control there. So let's take that head control and just kind of push that down a little bit more. Let's take that head angle and see if I can maybe twist him around just a little bit more so we can get a little bit of the silhouette of the nose poking through on the face there. Maybe just a little bit of a tilt to the head here, just so we get those brows overlapping. Now, I haven't done anything with the face, that's a whole other thing, but we can kind of push this. And this is something I do in my own shots, is just try to just set another key, take the same pose and try to make it better. And you can always just go back and forth and compare. Does it feel better? Does it feel interesting? So for example, what else can we do? Well, let's see if we can push the shoulders a little bit more. We can definitely see that there's kind of a contrapposto here. So maybe I'm going to lower this shoulder just a little bit and raise this one even more, just to really kind of push that shrug in there, and maybe bring it forward just a little bit more. And once again, look at your whole pose. So for example, here I'm looking at his back. It's kind of flat right here. Well, if I take this and rotate it forward, maybe even the other one, look at that nice round shape we're getting here. It makes him feel like more collapsed inwards, whereas let's say you were doing a superhero pose, you'd go with the opposite, like that, where the chest is puffed out, but the back, you can feel that like pressure and that pinch inside. So rounding that out. Okay. What else can we try to do? Well, the line of action, I kind of want the hips to lead a little bit more. So let's just push the whole body forward a little bit. And again, keep an eye out on your pose. You don't want to throw him so far out of balance that he's going to fall over. Maybe push him over this leg just a little bit more. Push that offset between the center of the hips to the feet so that they don't line up perfectly in the center. Okay, what else can we do? Well, maybe I can push the feet just a little bit. Maybe push this one just back ever so slightly, or this one forward, just to push that offset in the feet. A little bit there. It's little things. Let's see, can I push the hips a little bit more? Get that nice line through. So thinking of simple versus complex lines, how can I push this so I get a nice curve in here versus the other side? Now I think with the body, I'm noticing that this line here is just perfectly straight. So how can I push that? How can I make that shape just a little bit more curved back. Okay. And don't be afraid of really exaggerating things. Like I'm starting to crank this quite a bit here. And that's fine. At this point, we already know that we have a backup. If something goes wrong, I can always go back here. But I have this one now that we can push, make better. Let's see, let's get this arm kind of back out just a little bit. Already that line of action feels much stronger. One thing I'm noticing is I like how the feet kind of angle back here. I'm just going to bring this foot in just a little bit so we get that, really get that feeling of the hips leading that action there. Really feel that curvature in there. Okay. What else? Let's figure out that elbow. Maybe bring it... Do we want to bring it further out? No, that's pointing straight to camera. I could bring it further in so we get a better shoulder silhouette, or maybe somewhere around here. So again, just playing around, seeing what feels better. At this point, I'm still looking at my reference, but it's more looking at the feel of the pose, kind of rotating around, make sure everything feels good, looks good. My balance, watch that the hips don't just line up perfectly with the feet. Maybe pushing this out here so we get a stronger line through there. Making sure that the lines are not symmetrical. So if we look at this side, see how there's a stronger V shape here versus the front that's got just a slight curve. So I could exaggerate that a little bit. Really make that side a stronger V versus this one. I'm still keeping the core of the pose, but we're just pushing things a little. Let's see, what else can we do? Well, at this point, let's maybe push the feet. I'm noticing that this foot feels a little parallel to the other. So let's just kind of push that a little bit, make that nice V shape to the feet. So maybe something like that. Let's take the hips. Maybe we can angle them back just a little bit to help push that angle of the body. Okay. So that's feeling better already. It's not a big change, but if we kind of compare this to this, see how especially this shoulder feels more like twisted in? The line of action, you really feel it in the stomach now. And the thing that I like about doing this, at least in this way, when you're first starting, is you can see what works and what doesn't. So as I'm turning this, it's like, okay, it's definitely feeling better, but I lost the silhouette of this shoulder, like this arm right here. It just kind of, it's totally lost. So let's try to get that back. So there's definitely some stuff that I had before that worked. So let's try to get the best of both worlds. Get that in there. Maybe if the head is a little bit more tilted. And same with the neck. There we go. Now we've got that silhouette of the elbow in there. We've got that back in. And we're really pushing that line of action there. Okay. Watch that pit of the neck right in there in the clavicle go straight down to the feet. And if you're looking at it in the view, you can just kind of do this. Line it up with the edge of the screen, and I'm using 2D pan and zoom to move the camera here. And you'll see where the pit of the neck lines up. So I'm actually not bad. I'm right at the toes. So that's not too bad. Let's see. What else could I do? Well, at this point, I kind of want to try something. I just want to push this shoulder back. Just experiment. Do I like it back or forward? I kind of like it back. So this is where now I can start tweaking my animation a little bit. And pulling maybe away from my reference. So just the way the shoulder works here, by moving it back, it just gives a stronger shape to the entire thing. I also kind of want to lower that shoulder just a little bit, so we have a stronger contrast between the hips and the shoulders here. Okay, so something like that. Let's say, for sake of argument, that's good. Well, we can just compare. And you can see it's the same pose. It's just a little bit more. Whereas this is very straight in the body. This, we're just feeling a little bit more of that curve. And maybe there's a little too much. Right? As we go back and forth, we can go, maybe I overdid that rotation. Well, I can bring it back a little bit. But it's still stronger than it was before. Now, from there, the next thing to do, let's say we've done this. This is the second pass. We go through, yes, improve all those different things. Maybe, like, for example, this arm here, we're noticing a little too much negative space right there. Let's bring that arm just back a little bit closer to the body, so it kind of pulls that whole line through there. Now is the time when we start going into the fine details of the shot. So, for example, turning on the bend bows. Bend bows are huge in posing. In general, you haven't finished a pose until you've worked with the bend bows. It's not that it's absolutely necessary, but that's where you're really going to get the visual stylization and appeal in a pose. It's what makes like a Disney shot look so good, is these bend bows and deformers. So for example, if I turn on the bend bows of the legs, these are just a whole series of controls that allow you to bend the limbs. And what this allows you to do is exaggerate the flow and kind of, I guess you could say, the lines through the pose. So for example, let's take the legs here. If I wanted to, I could just exaggerate these bend bows ever so slightly, just kind of push them back. And actually, I might move them left to right instead. Make sure I'm moving in object mode. Just a little bit to the side here. And you can see how it's changing that shape of the leg. Where instead of having just a straight, boring leg here, I can start to push this and get a little bit of a shape in there. Just a little. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to go for that straight versus curved. The inside of the leg is going to be straight right here. Get a curve on the back. Now for the thigh, the thigh has a little bit of an S curve to it. So I can take this and just move it in ever so slightly. Just a little bit. And we get this S shape to the thigh. The other one, we could do a similar thing. I'm going to bring out that thigh here. Now this is where you don't really have to worry too much about how it looks in all angles. The bend bows are going to start distorting things. But I can bring out this leg so we just get a little bit more kind of musculature in that upper thigh. And then let's kind of push this back so we get a little bit more definition in that calf muscle right there. It's very slight, but it's there. Yeah, legs, when you look at legs, it's like, oh yeah, they're just straight. And then you actually look at them and start drawing them or modeling them, and it's crazy how many curves there are and how everything is just like S-shaped. So it's just a small change, but that's going to make a big difference. We can use this control right here. This is the spine control. So I can use this to kind of push that stomach out just a little bit more. Kind of get a little bit more curvature into that spine. right around there. So just pushing that line of action of the body there. Let's see. We could turn on the bend bows for the arms. So for the arms, especially on this one, this would be a great one to add a little bit of a bend bow to. So I'm going to take this and just kind of curve it this way. So we get a curvature into the wrist of the arm. Or from the arm, I should say. So instead of just this straight line thing, we get a little bit of a flow right through there. Now, because his arm is compressed, maybe we want to really accentuate that bicep feeling just a little bit compressed. I could use the bend bows up here. Maybe just add a little scaling here. Some rigs don't have scaling on the bend bows. It's nice when they do, but I could just add that. And now we've got a little bit of musculature in there. I could even just kind of push it out ever so slightly, just to get a little definition between the shoulder and the bicep. Or if I wanted to, I could just round that out just a little bit. And we can do the same with the other arm. Honestly, you don't have to go too far with bend bows. It's very subtle. But it is a nice thing to tweak. So I can push that curve from the arm into the wrist here just a little bit. If you go too far, you're going to look like Popeye, where it's just noodle arms. But a little bit makes a big difference. I can maybe go through, like we've got this control here. I can use this to enhance the bend of the neck just a little bit. So I'm looking at the curvature of the top of the neck right here with a nice curve in there. What else can we do? Well, the body has its own sculpting controls. So these are the free spine controls or the sculptor controls. So let's just use this free spine for now. And what this allows me to do is tweak the shape of the body. So if I wanted to get a little bit more of a pinch right in there, I could do that using these controls. So kind of pull this over. And now we get a little bit more of a sharp bend in there versus just a boring round curve. We're trying to make it a little bit more interesting. Are you seeing bend bows? Yeah. So sometimes they're called sculptors. There's a lot of different names for them. It's really just a control that lets you deform the rig. A lot of good rigs have these controls in them, and they should be part of most rigs. You're not going to see them in gaming rigs, but in most acting rigs, they should be in there somewhere. So let's see, how else can I push this? I could use this to push the curve of the body on this side, just get that nice curve in there. Let's see, I kind of want to push the hips a little bit more forward here. Just a little bit. Really get those hips to lead the action here. Okay. And then even the head has these scale controls, so I could maybe, if he's kind of frowning, without having to pose out the face, I can just squash the face a little bit so he feels a little bit more kind of intense. So even just something like this. So if we compare this to what we had before, it's not a big difference, honestly, but look at the legs especially. See how in this one, the legs are just kind of straight and boring? But in this one, there's a flow, there's a curvature to them. Your eyes are kind of drawn through, and there's just this, it's almost like looking at a river. It's not much, but it just takes that pose from okay to ooh, ah. Now I'm not saying this pose is fantastic. I would definitely have to pose the face. Generally in the face, if ever you're kind of feeling that like it's a little too default, just pose the brows a little bit. It makes a big difference. So just that is going to help. Then I can just take the mouth. Facial posing is a whole other thing. We can do a demo on that at some point. But even just that helps a lot. And Lewis, hey, Happy New Year. It's good to see you again. Let's see, are Benbow controllers that are painted weights for a small specific location? Yeah, typically Benbows are just for like a very specific location. So for example, this, if I move this around, it only affects the wrist. That's it. And it's just allowing me to deform it a little bit. Okay. So I'm noticing I'm getting a little bit of a tangent with that hand now. I'm just going to pull this out ever so slightly. Not too much, not too much. Yeah. There. So make sure I don't have a tangent. And there we go. So there's our pose. Now, honestly, I could keep going with this. There's a lot more we can do. Like we can keep tweaking the free spine controls, really shape the upper chest. But this is pretty good. Now, let's actually compare where we started. So that's our T-pose. This is the typical pose I see many students do. Don't do this. If you're posing like this, it usually means that you're not analyzing the pose, not paying attention to the little details. And every little detail counts. Now, like we said, it doesn't matter that you try to copy the pose. We're not copying, but we're making sure that it works, that it makes sense. And if we're changing something, we are changing it for a reason, a conscious choice. That is the core principle here, is that anything you do should be a conscious choice. So from this, we created this pose here, which is much better, definitely, than this one. There's a line of action. It just feels a little bit more interesting. It's still a little stiff. This was the first pass. Just trying to make sure that we incorporate a little bit of everything from the reference. From there, we exaggerated it. And then from there, we refined it and polished it. And we can definitely see a difference between, let me actually make this a little easier so we can, oops, not time slider. Oop. And then range slider, that's what I want. So we can definitely see that difference between this pose and this pose. So really think through your posing. And again, the reason this is important is that once you start animating, everything is going to be building off of your first pose. So if you don't take time to make sure that that pose is decent, again, you don't have to polish it. You don't have to use Benbows right away, all of this stuff. That's kind of a polishy thing. But if your pose isn't good, the animation isn't going to be good. Take that time. Take that extra little bit of planning to analyze the reference that you have, figure out what's happening and how you can enhance it, make it better. Push the line of action, push the symmetry, push the silhouette, push the negative space, push all of it. That's going to make your poses better. So, yeah, I guess with that, and Godsblade, thank you so much. With that, does anyone have any questions on that before we call it? We're kind of over time a little bit here, but hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully it made sense. And I should mention, if you look at this view or this pose from any view, it should still be pretty good. So if I rotate my camera here, there's no obviously broken things to this. It works. The bend bows will start to distort things a little bit from different views. That's fine. That's their goal, is to just make a certain thing look good from a specific view. Everything else though works. If I needed to change my camera, I just have to redo a little bit of bend bow stuff. It's good. Yeah, like if we look at these two, we get the core idea, but it's not a copy. It's different. There's definitely a bigger change in the one side here, but that's okay. We're not copying. And especially when you're dealing with a rig with totally different proportions, it's going to be very different. Let's see. I missed the whole stream. No. I'm streaming tomorrow if you have time, but yeah, always feel free to, and this goes for everyone, always feel free to ask questions and demo requests. I'm always happy to prep stuff for the future. Let's see. Random question. Is there a way to constrain a locator to an FK wrist? Yes. So locator to FK, you would just select the FK wrist. Well, I can do this right here. Let me actually save first so I don't accidentally delete the whole pose. Oh yeah, sorry. I need to look at people's references and shots too, super quick. So I'm going to just take a locator here. And I can just constrain it to the FK wrist. Just select the FK wrist, select the locator, constrain, parent, and there you go. So now it's constrained and moves with the wrist. So that's it. Now, what you can't do is constrain an FK wrist to something else. So if you're trying to constrain the FK wrist to a locator and have the FK wrist follow that, that's not going to happen. Because it's FK, it's just not going to follow along. So you have to be very careful of that. It's only with FK, you can only constrain things to it. You can't constrain FK to something else. Let's see. I feel like the original has a bend forward more. Yeah, it definitely does. Mine kind of, if he's kind of leaning back a little bit more questioningly. But this is where, hey, we can always tweak it. And again, this is also dependent on the shot. If you want your character to feel a little bit more like pulled back, that's fine. If I want him to feel a little bit more like he's leaning forward, well, it's not a hard change. There we go. So now we've got a little bit of that forward lean in there. And this is where also get feedback from other people. As you're looking at this shot, you're going to get used to how you feel it should be. But when you get feedback, maybe you're going to find out, oh, yeah, it is leaning too far back, or, oh, maybe I should tweak something else. It's always good to get feedback. Let's see. What about the closed model that's penetrating with the elbow? Can we get it fixed? So, oh, right here, you mean? As long as the audience doesn't see it, we don't have to worry about it at all. So that's not going to be a problem. Honestly, a little penetration is, oh, right here. Yeah. So again, the audience doesn't see it, so that's not a problem at all. If we really wanted to avoid that or solve it, we can use the bend bows to help kind of shape the body around itself. Or if you don't have bend bows, you can use a blend shape to do that. So even just the bend bows, that creates a little bit more of a pressure in there, so it doesn't feel like it's just cutting through. So a blend shape or playing with the bend bows can help quite a bit. But in this case, it wouldn't matter because no one's going to see it, so I wouldn't worry about it.